In this video, we're going to look at how to tell if a graph is a function and how to find the domain. So in order to tell if a graph is a function, we want to use what's called the vertical line test. The vertical line test is just one way to see if a graph is a function. And it works really well when you have the actual graph. So the vertical line test, what this means is you use a vertical line and you trace this vertical line across your graph. If the vertical line hits your graph at more than one place at any time, then that means your graph is not a function. In order to be a function, a graph can only have one cross of the vertical line. So right here, we're okay. But look right here. If I put it right here, well, it looks like the vertical line is crossing our graph in 1, 2, 3 places. This means that for the same x value, the same input value, we would have 3 different output values or different y values. And our function machine is not going to work because we don't have that ratio of input to output. We need to have a unique output for every input, which means that if x goes in, only one y value can come out, meaning we cannot have 3 different y values for the same x value. So this graph would not be a function. Because our vertical line is crossing our graph in more than one place. Let's try this one. So for part B, if we trace our vertical line across our graph, it looks like it's okay. It looks like it's only going to hit the graph in one place. So yes, this one is a function. Let's try this one. This one's really tricky. Notice right here, this is an open circle, meaning that this is correlating to -2. And at x equals -2, you cannot use this value right here, which looks like -2. You have to use this value, which is -1. So this is an open circle signifying a value that we can get extremely close to. We can get very, very close to -2, but we're not using -2 in that case. And then towards the top, this one right here is colored in, meaning that's the value for when x is -2. So let's try it. I can trace my vertical line over that graph. So yes, this one is a function. Let's try the next one, part D. Oh, right there, I have a problem already. See right here, that whole vertical line right there is hitting my graph and my blue line. So this one is not going to be a function. And it is not a function because it is hitting our vertical lines in more than one place. So how do we figure out the domain? Well, you figure out the domain by finding the x values you cannot use, and then you say you can use everything else. So let me show you what that means. So for our first function right here, what can we not use? Well, if we have a fraction, we know we cannot have division by 0. So that means we would not be able to use any values that make x squared minus x equal to 0, because we cannot have division by 0. So that would be a restriction to our function. So if I cannot have division by 0, let's figure out where I do have division by 0, and then we can say we'll use everything else. How would we factor this? We can pull an x out, which will leave us with x minus 1. If x is 0, then 0 times anything is 0. If x minus 1 is 0, then 0 times anything is 0. So we have two options here. We can set x equal to 0, And that would be our first option for how to get an answer of 0. Or we can make x minus 1 0. And that would be our second option for how to make the whole thing 0. So we have x equals 0 and we have x minus 1 equals 0. So that means x is 0 and x could be 1. And either of these values are going to give us division by 0, and that's things that we don't want. So we would say x cannot be 0 or 1. And if x is anything else, then it will be okay. Let's try our next piece. For this one, we have square root. Well, we know we cannot have the square root of a negative. So if you have a square root of a negative, that's going to be a restriction. So what is under our radical cannot be a negative value. So that means that we need to create an inequality here. We need to stipulate that u minus 4 needs to be greater than or equal to 0, because then we would not have a negative value. So if u minus 4 needs to be greater than or equal to 0, that means u needs to be greater than or equal to 4. So this would mean x needs to be greater than or equal to 4. And if we put that in interval notation, it would mean that we can use 4 and anything bigger than 4. So 4 inclusive using our bracket through infinity. In this case, this 1.5u, that doesn't change our domain at all because there's no restrictions there. It's okay for that to be negative. It's okay for that to be 0. There's nothing that's going to yell at you on your calculator from 1.5 times u. But if you put in division by 0 or you try to take a square root of a negative number, those are things that we can't do. So those are restrictions, and that's what's going to put limiting values on your domain.